This is the second inspection of Hive 13. I have taken the roof off and just checking the food. Most of the fondant has now been eaten, but the candy pollen is hardly touched. Just checking for any bees underneath it. I'm now going to remove the fondant, and as you can see, the bees have already started making brace comb to kind of put more food in. I have a queen excluder underneath the super, so I'm just having a quick look to see if they've drawn out one of those outside frames. I'm just now going to put the super aside while I first of all check the brood box. So I'm now going to take the super off and make quite sure I put it somewhere quite stable, and preferably over the empty super. The first thing I noticed that the bees have been building quite a number of brace comb, so I'm going to clean that off first so I can take it off without too much trouble. I'm going to check as well why they are putting so much brace comb on the queen excluder. No queen on it, and now I'm just gently wafting the smoke over it so I don't distress the bees too much. I take out the end frame, no queen on it, no food in there, so that's still empty, waiting to be filled up. Here the bees have started capping over the nectar. As you can see, there's quite a bit of brace comb over that frame, and bees are hard at work. No sign of brood on that frame either. So I just keep on cleaning up as I go along and making sure I don't leave any brace comb in the apiary, on the basis that it's not very good hygiene. I've now come to the first frame that has brood on it, capped brood, and some larvae and eggs. So once again, bees have been kind of making brace combs to the side. And so the first frame of brood is 5 frames in. You may notice that the frames are perpendicular to the entrance. And that is because these frames are what is called, they're spread along in the warm way. There are 2 ways you can have your frames in hives: perpendicular to the entrance or parallel. Both are equally good. More information on this kind of positioning on hive can be gotten from the Dave Cushman side, which has a very good explanation. We can cut that off. So we're now nearing the main brood nest, where we may see a lot more capped brood, as indeed you can. And we can see capped brood and uncapped brood on that one. And that one's very similar. No sign of the queen. We're now coming to the last brood frame in this hive. Equally, lots of capped brood in there. And the queen has also been laying drones in the frame that we've just seen. And at the end, we'll just have a frame of pollen. So now we just have to put it all back together as we found it. so that the brood nest stays together. We can clean off a bit more drawn comb as well, and put our empty frame that we took out at the beginning, that can go back towards the end, ready for the bees to work with it. Now I'm sliding over the queen excluder quite nice and slow so I don't crush any bees, and then put the super back on. Once again, I just make sure that no bees are caught underneath, because that's particularly bad, because once you crush them, the content of their gut will just cause nosema in the hive. So I'm now looking at the frames in the super, because the queen was laying in them during the winter time, and now that there is a queen excluder, she can no longer lay in these frames, but I need to check that all the capped brood is being hatched out, so that eventually the bees can kind of put nectar in. So once again, you can see this, she laid a lot of eggs in this super. She has also laid drone cells at the bottom there. So that's not always good news, because when they are at the bottom of the frame and us beekeepers remove them, very often the cells get opened and the poor old larvae inside are exposed, and that's the end of it. But there was not much we can do about it. So once again, lots of capped brood in there as well. Neatly stored honey on the top. And once again, this side has lots of capped brood cells, drone cells, sorry, which is actually makes me feel quite glad, because once the colony starts raising drones, it means that they have sufficient food to kind of feed all the different types of bees that are in there. At the same time, we also have to remember that at our next inspection, it's very important to release any newly hatched drones that are in the supers into the brood box, because they will not be able to get through the queen excluder to join the other bees in the bottom box. And when the drones can't get through the queen excluder, they will die. So that's definitely not what we want to see. Now that I've looked through the brood box and the super, I'm quite happy that this colony is doing very well. Building up nicely, the queen's laying well. So I'm now going to kind of completely close it up with the crown board. I've taken off the fondant. I'm leaving on the candy pollen for another little while. And I'll check again next week and make a decision on whether to take it off or not. I also plan to put a brood box with foundation frames on top for the bees to draw out some clean comb, because some of the combs in the bottom box they could do with replacing this year. But I'll leave that to the next time. And kind of in about a week's time, come back. And to conclude, all I've got to do now is fill in the record sheet. What I usually start off with is, the date. So I know the intervals between inspections, what the temperament of the hive was, which in our case was very good. Then, have I seen the queen? No, but I'm not very worried about it because she is laying well and there's evidence of eggs. Then what is quite important to keep track of is any growth or dwindling of the brood nest. So I will put in that there are 5 frames of brood at all stages. And anything else that kind of comes to mind that is worth recording, so that I kind of reminded the next time what I should look out for. And that's all.